One afternoon, Chuang-Tzu, a famous Zen master, was traveling across a river in his small boat. It was a quiet day, with only the sounds of the gentle waves lapping against the side of the boat and the occasional call of birds in the distance. Chuang-Tzu was in a peaceful, meditative state, calmly drifting along the water when suddenly a boat came speeding towards him. The other boat, much larger and with no sign of concern, crashed directly into Chuang-Tzu's boat. The impact jolted Chuang-Tzu's boat violently, nearly throwing him off balance. His initial reaction was one of anger, frustration, and surprise. He looked up expecting to see someone in the other boat, someone who might apologize or take responsibility for the crash. But to his astonishment, the boat was empty. There was no one in sight. No person, no excuse, no apology. Chuang-Tzu paused, staring at the empty boat, feeling the anger welling up inside of him. His emotions began to take control, and for a brief moment he considered yelling, cursing the person who had caused the collision. His mind raced with thoughts of what he would say to the person, how he would express his displeasure with their recklessness. Then, as he continued to stare at the boat, something profound occurred to him. What am I angry about? Chuang-Tzu asked himself. In that moment of realization, his anger started to dissolve. He understood that his anger was not really about the collision, nor was it about the boat. The anger had arisen because he had attached it to the idea of a person being responsible. But now that he saw there was no one in the boat, he could not direct his anger anywhere. There was no one to blame, no one to accuse. The anger was born from his own attachment to the idea of a person to blame. If the boat had been occupied, I would have blamed the person. But now that the boat is empty, where is my anger to go? He thought to himself. Chuang-Tzu laughed quietly. His anger had vanished as suddenly as it had arisen. He had no reason to be angry anymore. It wasn't the collision that caused the anger. It was the mental construct of blaming someone for the situation. As Chuang-Tzu rowed away from the empty boat, he began reflecting on how often people in the world get angry, frustrated, and upset over situations, blaming others for their misfortune. He realized that many of the conflicts, emotional struggles, and suffering in life come from attaching emotions, particularly negative emotions like anger and resentment, to external events and people. The master pondered further. How many times do we as humans give our power away by attaching anger to situations that have no inherent need for such a response? How often do we create suffering by holding on to our grievances or blaming others for things that are beyond their control or even beyond our own control? Chuang-Tzu's moment of clarity was a powerful one. If he could detach himself from the need to blame, his peace would not be disturbed by circumstances. He saw that his peace depended not on external events or the behavior of others, but on his own response to them. Just as there was no person in the empty boat to blame, there was no need to carry the weight of anger or frustration in his heart. This story teaches the concept of non-attachment, an essential practice for overcoming suffering. Attachment is not limited to physical objects. It can also include our emotional reactions to events or people. By attaching anger, resentment, or frustration to specific situations, such as the boat collision, we allow those emotions to control us. The empty boat story emphasizes that, like the empty boat, many things in life are not as they seem. Often we fill them with projections, expectations, or judgments, when in reality, they might not deserve such a response. Chuang-Tzu's realization is a timeless lesson. When something happens that triggers anger, frustration, or other negative emotions, we are often reacting to our own attachments and assumptions rather than the event itself. The act of blaming others, or even blaming ourselves, can keep us trapped in a cycle of emotional disturbance. The story also highlights the Zen practice of observing one's emotional reactions without becoming entangled in them. Just as Chuang-Tzu noticed the empty boat and understood that there was no one to blame, we can learn to recognize when our emotions arise and let them go, instead of holding on to them. In this way, we free ourselves from unnecessary suffering. In essence, the empty boat teaches that if we can let go of our need to assign blame, we can find inner peace. We are not victims of the events that happen around us, but masters of our own responses to those events. When we stop attaching ourselves to the idea of blame or resentment, we can move through life with greater clarity and serenity.